Hey, my name is Makayla Fick and I have ankylosing spondylitis or AS. So today I'm going to get into a little bit of my story with finding out about how I had AS and my diagnosis and how I navigated that. So in front of me I just have some notes, so I apologize if I'm looking down, but I don't know all of this by memorization. But let's get into it. So let me see where I want to start. I guess back when I was in elementary school, I had purple hair and bangs because I wanted to be edgy, But at this point in my life, I was working on gymnastics and I really, really enjoyed that. And so I was trying to master my skills. I really enjoyed the floor routines and bars and just the idea of how gymnastics required both strength and grace. And I was really flexible, which was a good thing, but also something important to note that I'll touch on later. And so moving forward though with my life, I kind of had to decide between gymnastics and other sports that I was fortunate enough to be able to try out or experience. And so I ended up picking soccer over gymnastics. So I played soccer up until my freshman year of high school, pretty much, competitively for a club team or different club teams. And then I hit another crossroads where I had to pick between soccer and then my newfound passion of running or cross country and track. And so I ended up picking running over soccer. And that was a really tough decision for me, but I just knew I really, really enjoyed running and the team that I had there as well. And I saw that I could potentially have a future with that. And so that's why I picked it. And unfortunately though, I was pretty injury prone with throughout high school. I didn't have any major injuries, but I felt like I had to do a ton of recovery things like rolling, ice baths, all of that, just to be able to get to the starting line or to be able to compete. And so it was a little bit of a struggle because most of my other teammates or friends, or for that matter, didn't have to do as many things and they were able to remain healthy. But I felt like I had a routine I had to stick to, and just in order just to be able to put workouts and runs together. So that was a little bit of a weird thing. And I had some issues with my knees and hips primarily is what bugged me. But we had just assumed at that point in my life that it was growing related because a lot of people were growing during that time. And I was a little bit late to the whole growing process, so I was still growing too. But then with that though, I was fortunate enough with the times I was able to race and all of that to be able to have the opportunity to compete at the Division I level, which is definitely a blessing. And so I was looking at some different schools, but I ended up picking University of Mississippi. And the main thing I wanted to get across here though is I picked there because I received advice, I think when I was first looking at colleges, that if you were ever injured, pick a place that you knew you would be happy if you could no longer compete or run. And so I kept that in mind when I was looking. And the first unofficial visit I took to Ole Miss or Oxford, Mississippi, it was my first visit of any school too, and I loved it so much. I was like, this kind of feels like a second home, but I was like, don't get too excited. It's your first one, bro. Pipe down. But none of the other visits compared to that, and just the hospitality that's there as well, and the team that they had there, and as well as my major, they had a really good exercise science program, and I knew I wanted to go to a school that was well-rounded and not just for athletics or not just for solely academics, but something I knew I would enjoy if I were to be injured. And unfortunately, that's kind of what ended up happening. Most of my collegiate career was riddled with injury. I remained pretty healthy most of my freshman year. That fall, going into my freshman year, though, I struggled a little bit with just navigating new type of training, but also a little bit of homesickness and not being able to meet a lot of people, which I was not bummed about, but when you're that far away from home, because I'm originally from California, it was a little bit tough not having new relationships or new people to interact with. And so, there was a couple of times where I was in isolation housing too. A story that I set off the fire alarm with some salmon. I could get into that another time though. But going into my spring semester, which would be track season, I just had the philosophy of just enjoying to be able to run and taking advantage of every opportunity. And fortunately, I was I was healthy and I was able to compete. I had one indoor race and I almost got DQ'd from it because I had never run indoors before, and it was on a bank track, and like when they were like, on your marks, the spikes I had were like the Nike bubble spikes, and so I put my toe to the line and I lost balance a little bit, so I like went whoop, and then they like flagged me down, but then I just got like a green card, which I was like, whew. I was like, watch me get DQ'd from my first indoor race ever. I was like, that would be my luck, but ended up working out. I didn't have like my best race, but it was just nice to get out there and see what the body and everything was capable of. But then moving on to outdoor season, I had a lot of really good consistent training and workouts under my belt at that point. And so I was able to PR in the 800 and then also run a pretty solid time in the 1500. And I was just thankful to be able to travel with the team and just get to see more places, because that was one thing I was really looking forward to as a collegiate athlete, of just seeing other parts of the country and also just building connections with your teammates while you're traveling or on the bus or in an airplane or whatnot. And so those experiences I'll definitely never forget. And so going into my sophomore year, though, I felt like I was kind of like on a high in terms of my collegiate career. Like I had some good training, and I was excited to use the momentum from my freshman track season into my sophomore cross country and that following track season. And so I felt as almost I was like unstoppable at this point, until I was literally stopped by my first major injury in October of 2021, which was a stress reaction in the lesser trochanter of my right femur. And I really didn't know what it could have been, because I'll tell you a little bit of like what I felt. So I thought it probably wasn't muscular, because I had like a lot of like hip flexor things in the past, but this one was a little bit different in the sense that like it would hurt for me just to sleep on it. It would hurt for me to go up the stairs, and it would hurt for me to like do like any movement where I'm like lifting my leg like to get into the car. And I was like, ooh, like I don't think that's muscular. And I took a little bit of time off, and then I tried to run on it again. Still didn't feel good. It felt like super weak to run on, like almost like it'd be giving out. So we got an MRI, which revealed those results, and I was really bummed because at this point I was using running kind of as an outlet too, because that July or August going into my sophomore year, my parents had told my brother and I that they were going to separate. And so I was kind of using running as an outlet of just like a means to clear my mind, and also just to navigate that news. And my relationship with God wasn't the strongest at that point. And so didn't really know, I guess, where else to go in terms of that. And so when I had running stripped from me too, that kind of revealed to me that there's not a lot in this world that's permanent besides God. And so that's kind of when I initially started to realize that I need to strengthen my relationship with God, and not only go to him when I'm at a low point or when I'm injured, but also to seek him when things are going well. And so that's kind of what instigated me to seek out my getting to know God on a more personal level. And so with that, though, that injury recovered pretty quickly. And then my spring semester, so spring of 2022, I unfortunately had a stress reaction in my left femoral shaft. And that one, also a little bit of a surprise, because that one did feel more muscular to me because it wasn't in the head of my femur. And so it was another bummer though too, because I was traveling to Florida to run a track meet at the time, and that's when it's really started to bug me. And I had gotten treatment for it, like needles and everything, but it still didn't really help. And I was thinking about maybe racing on it, but I decided, along with my coach and trainers, that it probably wouldn't be the best for my body long term to try to race on that if I was in that much pain with it. And it was similar where I was limping a little bit, and I just felt like I couldn't put a lot of weight on it. But I was trying to make the most of my time since I was able to travel to Florida. I was able to see some of my family while they came to watch me race even though I couldn't, but I was also able to support my teammates and also get really meet more of my teammates, especially on the pole vaulting team, and because I was roommates with one of the girls, Sam, who's on our pole vaulting team, and so it was really cool just to get to learn more about that side of the track and field world and gain a friend through that as well. So overall, thankful for the trip, but definitely a bummer in the sense of why I wasn't able to get to race. And then at this point, though, since I had stress reactions in both my femurs, I was like, they're both equally messed up. Like, surely, like, I'm done getting, like, these types of injuries. But then that femur on my left side, it took a little bit to heal. And so into that summer almost, I was just cross-training. I was trying not to overdo it in terms of not loading the bone too much. And so I had a couple more MRIs, and then the one in July revealed that it had healed all the way. So I was like, whew. So I started up on the Alter G, slow progression. And then when I got back to campus, the fall of 2022, hiccups, the fall of 2022, I had some good workouts, and I was planning on just redshirting that cross-country season, so that way I could get some good consistent training before track season of 2023. Yes. And so I believe it was in October of 2022. Workouts had been going pretty well, but then I was on a warm-up for a workout, and I rolled my ankle in a pretty bad pothole, and I trained on it still, or did that workout, and then did that the next run the next day, and then the Friday workout on it. But the workout on Friday was on a trail that we have, and I rolled it again on a pine cone there, and so it didn't heal all the way, and it started, I think, it was like a pretty bad ankle sprain, and my foot had like swollen up from it, so it couldn't really fit in my running shoes, and so it hurt just to kind of put weight on it, like right where I believe it's my peroneus inserts into one of, I believe it's like my 5th metatarsal joint, and so it was pulling on that, and so I took a little bit of time, or like a few days off. We did some treatment for it. I thought it was good. But it was still really bugging me, so I had a slow progression back on the Alter G again, and then once I was able to run on land, started doing that, but then my left hip started to act up again, and I was like, oh no. I was like, maybe it's just muscular, like, probably just because I was on the Alter G, like, I just need to get in just some more runs, and I should be good. But unfortunately, it started really bugging me around the time of Thanksgiving break. And then when I came back, that first long run, I couldn't complete it. Or I think I maybe did, but it was hurting towards the end. So I told my trainers, we got another MRI. And at this point, when I got the MRI, it was in December, early December, right around finals week. And we got the results that I had another stress reaction, but this time it was in my femoral neck, which the femoral neck one, what my doctor was explaining to me, it's a little bit not scarier, but it's a little more dangerous in the sense of if I were to keep training on it, the way that your femoral head is and how it inserts into your hip, where my stress reaction was, if I were to keep training on it and it broke, then my femoral head, or that, because it's a ball and socket joint, that ball would almost separate from the socket because it has no more of like a stem or connection to that bone, which is not very good, and it would require surgery if that happened, and that would be a pretty major surgery. And so I was definitely pretty upset, and I was just kind of asking God, like, I don't know if running is the way you want me to go, but I also don't know why I keep having these injuries. Like, I'm trying to do the best that I can in terms of like nutrition, sleep, and at this point I had my period too, and so I was like, I know it's not the female athlete triad. I've met with nutritionists, I've gotten some blood work done, like my vitamin levels look good, because my freshman year I unfortunately had some vitamin levels that were off that fall, but at this point, like, everything was looking good, so I was like, what's going on? Like, And so for me, it was just hard because I felt like I was in an unknown state, just kind of floating around, trying to navigate life and treading through water of like, I'd go online, try like search in my symptoms of like multiple stress reactions, da 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 da. And I mean, Google's not really your friend when you type in your symptoms or whatnot. So, but one thing that had kind of popped up was potentially something related to my hormones or autoimmune or joint related. And I was like, And so at this point, it was the spring of 2023, because my stress reaction hadn't healed all the way. And so I couldn't run. And so at that point, I had no cross training. I was just walking, because that's what I was able to do. And then I picked up basketball because I wouldn't jump though, but just to go shoot hoops. Because to me, it was just a nice thing, because during that time, I would just take my ball to the hoops at my apartment complex at the time and just pray. And then while I was shooting, just try to get into a zone, just try to get into like a flow state, because I couldn't really use cross training or running at that point just to get into that flow state. And so I'd use that along with just praying to God while I was shooting, just to kind of give me something to, I guess like something in like a known thing. Like I knew that if I went to go play basketball, like I would shoot hoops. And that helped me in the sense of all the unknowns of my life, of my injuries, and if I would ever be able to run again. Or at this point, I was debating if I wanted to do a master's program. So what I wanted to do career-wise or with my education, there was a lot of unknowns. And so the only thing that I did know at the end of the day was that God would be there for me, and as well as my family and friends to lean on them. And so that definitely was another thing that I learned through these injuries. And I guess moving forward with that summer, so summer of 2023, I was home back in California, and I just decided to get some more blood work done because I wanted to see if it maybe was autoimmune or joint related. And so I went to my primary care doctor and I got some blood work done. And my initial blood work, we did quite a comprehensive panel, but one of them tested my HLA-B27 factor, and that had come back positive. And so that kind of indicates that you do have something autoimmune related, but further blood work would need to be done in order to narrow down what it could be, because autoimmune diseases have such like a vast array of like what it like could be, or like what markers you have and all of that. And so I was referred out to a rheumatologist, and then I got more blood work done, and my ANA titer was positive, and I had a specular nuclear pattern. And I'll show all my results on the screen here, and if I'm able to get my MRI scans too, I'll show them. But with all of that in mind, it just, that rheumatologist had told me that based off my MRIs and my results from blood work, that I had AS. And she also went on to kind of explain how it worked, and which I'll give you a basic explanation. So AS, or ankylosing spondylitis, is an autoimmune disease that impacts specifically your spine, but can expand to other joints too, like your sacrum and all the way up to your neck or your cervical spine, and then out to your other joints. And so in my case, I primarily had it within my sacrum, and how it works is that your body attacks itself and overproduces inflammation within your bones and your joints there. And so your body doesn't know how to fight off this inflammation. And because I was running and training on top of that inflammation, my femurs, which the strongest bone in the human body, not broke, but had a stress reaction to it. So it was where the bone swells almost to the point where it will break. And so we caught it right before that. But my doctors and trainers and people that I've spoken with believe that my AS, or my condition, most likely combined with just running, caused those stress injuries. And so at this point, I was a little bit hesitant though, because I'd never really heard of AS before, and it was more common for one in men, but I knew it was also people find out about it in their early 20s. and that it's genetic. And so I was like, well, I don't know, I kind of want a second opinion. Like, this is a big diagnosis, you know. And so then that fall, so when I went back to Oxford, Mississippi, because I went to Ole Miss at the time, I was referred out through athletics to a rheumatologist there in Oxford, and they did their own blood work and looked at my MRI scans, and I didn't tell them anything about what the doctor at home had told me, just because I wanted a second opinion, and kind of a raw, real opinion, and not one that's like, oh yeah, you do have that, like, after the fact, you know. But they confirmed that diagnosis to me, that I did have AS. And when I had mentioned earlier about having hyperflexibility, I'll kind of touch on that again. So with AS, I wanted to give you a little bit more insight on my symptoms, but before I touch on that, I do want to mention how much peace I had received from confirming this diagnosis, because there was such this long span of time where I didn't know why I kept getting injured, and I was just really bummed. And so to finally have this like message from God that, okay, you have this condition, so to have just a name to what was going on brought me a lot of peace. And so with that in mind, though, some of the symptoms that I had, or signs that I had, was the first one was hypermobility or flexibility, which is what the rheumatologist explained to me, is that my joints were very flexible, and so because of that, that was one indication of AS. Another one was related to blood work, so the positive HLA-B27, which is what I mentioned, and then the positive ANA screening with a nuclear speckled pattern, which I'm not a rheumatologist, so I couldn't tell you exactly what those mean, but basically they just narrowed down that it could be AS, or at first that it's an autoimmune disease within your joints, and then that it's AS. It's between AS and I believe a couple other things, but then my MRI scans and some of my other symptoms indicated that it was AS. And so with that, my MRIs indicated elevated systemic inflammation within my joints. And those MRIs were actually ones that I had on my hip to determine if I had stress reaction or stress fractures. And so, and I had even had an MRI done on my knee in 2018 when I was in high school, because I was having a lot of issues with it. And we wanted to just see if there's something muscular or tendon related going on. And so, but the purpose of these MRIs weren't necessarily to look at inflammation. And so when we looked at them again, or the doctors looked at them again, they'd seen, even back in my 2018 MRI and then my hip MRI, that I had this elevated systemic inflammation. And so that kind of also indicated that I had AS, or that my body was trying to fight itself, or had this excess inflammation that it did not know how to handle. And another symptom that I had was that I had achy joints, especially in the morning when I'd wake up. Like, my lower back, my knees and hips would be kind of achy. And then I love braiding. I don't have any braids in right now, but it when I was trying to braid, especially throughout like my sophomore and junior year of college, my fingers, like my joints, would start to hurt. And even when I was typing a little bit, like, they would get achy, and I was like, that's really weird, like, to have achy joints, like, I'm not really sure. And so I just kind of like tried to like exercises and stuff with them, but that was something that I thought was interesting to note. And then I think those are the main signs and symptoms I wanted to mention. But with this in mind, the rheumatologist had recommended that I get on Humira, which is a treatment for AS, because unfortunately there's no cure for AS, but there are treatments. And so Humira is, its medical term is, I believe it's adalimumab, or wait, adalimumab. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it, but basically, I was prescribed this medication because what it does is it's a immunosuppressant that I inject myself with 2 times a month, so every other week, into either my stomach or one of my thighs, and it inhibits my TNF, which is a tumor necrosis factor production in my body, which is a fancy way of kind of saying that it decreases inflammation in my body by blocking TNF from secreting excess inflammatory, or TNF from being secreted by my inflammatory cells. And so you might think that not having as much TNF is a good thing, like, oh, I don't want excess, like I want my inflammation to be blocked, but actually our bodies use TNF to alert us of illnesses and infection, and so it has a protective effect of fighting off these infections and illnesses. So blocking its secretion actually causes me to be more immunocompromised, in the sense that I have a higher chance of getting sick or having an infection like a upper respiratory infection, or even having infections referring to skin or potential skin cancers or diseases if I don't protect myself or if I'm not proactive. And so these are just important things I need to note in terms of when I want to I guess protect myself, but also be proactive in the sense of trying to prevent getting sick, because if I were to get sick, then it would probably be much worse than a normal illness that I would have. And so that was, I guess, one of the cons or negative sides of it, in terms of making me a little bit more deficient for Humira. And then another con was that obviously I would have to inject myself every other week, and then it needs to stay in the fridge. So just like in terms of traveling and stuff, I was just like, how does that kind of work? Another thing was injection site reaction. So I didn't know if I would be allergic to it, or if my stomach or legs would break out in hives if I were to have it, or whatnot. And so it took me a few weeks to kind of navigate if I wanted to try this treatment or not. But at the end of the day, for me, the major pro of this was that it would stop or try to block some of the inflammation within my joints, which long term would prevent my spine or my sacrum from fusing together. And for me, at the end of the day, that was the main thing, because it made me think about not being able to run around with my future kids or even grandkids and just kind of being more sedentary. And that's definitely not something I want to do, because I love being active and moving, which was the basis of starting this wellness platform of Movin with Mac. And so with that in mind, I decided to give Humira a try. And so I had started it in October of 2023. So what I learned in one of my exercise science classes, which was exercise testing and prescription, is that exercise is medicine. And so I know that there's other terms too, for like movement is medicine kind of thing. And so for me, I kind of took this into account when I was thinking about my autoimmune disease and how important it is to not be sedentary if you have the opportunity to not be. So with that, I kind of used that idea of like trying to be able to move and exercise and just move my body in ways that I enjoy. And so that, combined with Humira, creates this principle of a dose response effect, which means that my dose would be the combination of Humira or treatment and exercise. And my response to that dose would be less inflammation, more ability to work out or train, and then also prevention in terms of preventing my spine from fusing later on, and just overall being able to move my body and continue to move my body in ways I enjoy. And so each individual has their own type of dose to elicit their desired response. And so at the end of the day, it's just figuring out what works the best for you and sticking to that. And so Humira and exercise together is what's been working for me the past few months. And so with that in mind, I kind of wanted to touch on what I've noticed since I first, now that it's been a few months now of Humira, what I've noticed in terms of my symptoms and any changes that I've noted down. So the first one is that I'm definitely less stiff in the morning, and when I wake up, my bones aren't like So that's a good thing. And also my fingers are in a lot less pain trying to braid hair or type, which is weird to think about because, like, I guess I was kind of dealing with it for a little bit of time now, so that's been really nice. And then another thing I wanted to mention was I got my period back. And so I'd mentioned before that I'd had it initially when I was injured, and so that wasn't really a factor in terms of the female athlete triad. But unfortunately, I did lose it in April of 2023, and I got it back, though, in November of 2023. So during that span, though, I think I probably primarily lost it for one because of stress. I had a lot on my plate at that point. I know a lot of people do, but I just navigating the injuries and all of that and what I wanted to do future-wise and stuff. But I think another factor could have been because I had inflammation within my hips and in that region of my body. Your ovaries, or my ovaries, are in that region of your body as well. And so if I had all this inflammation there, my thoughts are my body was probably like, bro, your body is uninhabitable for a child right now, or for us to even produce an egg to make that happen. And so I think it just stopped the production of that because it was like, So more power to my body for knowing that. But I'm definitely glad to have my period back now. And I think with that as well, in terms of having my period back, some of my hormones, I think, have helped me in terms of, because during that span from April to November, my memory and like was really bad. And I also didn't really feel like myself. Like I kind of just felt like more groggy and not like, I don't know, kind of just like a little cloudy. And so now I have a lot more memory, or my memory is better. And I think one thing that I noticed a lot was during that time for classes, I had to study so much, like for simple quizzes or exams, like in order for me to grasp the material, I had to write things down so many times. And I'm like, it shouldn't be this hard. Like, it's never really been this hard before for me to study. Like, obviously, the topics, since they're more upper level exercise science classes, they're a little bit tougher. But I was like, I don't know why it's like so hard for me to get this information like locked in, but makes a little more sense now. But the next thing I also wanted to touch on is that now I have better digestion or bowel movements. I know most people probably don't want to hear that, but I think it's important that I mention that. And I think one of my best friends, Marissa, would like to hear that because we share some things about that sometimes. But anyway, another thing that I mentioned or noticed too is when I went back home to California this past December, so December of 2023, I met up with a chiropractor there because I like to get adjusted because of how my spine and my joints work. It just, sometimes I feel like they get locked up, and so it's nice just to get adjusted. So I got adjusted while I was there, and the chiropractor I had met had asked me about if I had had a load-bearing x-ray before, and I was like, no, I haven't. So we did one of those to look at leg length discrepancies, but we also looked at my sacrum, and he was like, oh, look at this, you have some scar tissue here. And I told him about my condition with AS, and so he was like, actually, I mean, you probably think like scar tissue, like, but actually that's good because that's a sign that my body and the inflammation is starting to heal. And so that was another indicator that Humira or the treatment is working, because I didn't really know what to expect in terms of how long it would take me to experience like any differences or changes. And I know everybody's different, so everybody reacts to this type of treatment differently. And so I just kind of wanted to see what it was like for the first few months. And I will be having another follow-up appointment with my rheumatologist in March. And from there, we'll do some more blood work to compare my labs pre-Humira or treatment and then post-Humira or treatment, and just to see at the molecular level if there's good changes occurring from this treatment, because if not, then there's no really reason for me to be on it. But from what I've experienced so far, a lot of these changes aren't necessarily physical. Like, I don't feel like I'm Superwoman now, like nothing could stop me because I'm on Humira, but I think just the little things stack up for sure that I had mentioned. Just definitely, I think, help to regulate my life to how I guess it had used to be pre-AS. And so with all of this, I also want to just advocate for autoimmune diseases or for AS specifically, because not a lot of people know about them, and it's definitely tricky to navigate what you might have and your symptoms, and there's a lot of things it could be. And so please just know that God is there for you, and I'm here for you when it comes to trying to navigate like any diseases or illnesses or medical issues in that sense, or even just unknowns of life, because when it comes to autoimmune diseases, like I know personally how it feels when your body is attacking itself and you kind of feel like it's like you're like in an out of body state. So please just know that I'm here for you and God's here for you. And so with all of this in mind, though, AS has revealed to me how important or crucial it is to move my body, which is where I came about the idea of moving with Mac, and this faith-based platform, which I'm very excited to expand on more. And I have a lot of different ideas that I've shared with a lot of my close friends, and I'm just definitely excited to see how it can hopefully just inspire at least one person and help out one person out there. And so if it can, I feel like I've accomplished my mission at the end of the day, but I will continue to work on inspiring more people through all of this. So with that in mind, though, I can't wait to see how God will continue to move through you and through me through this journey. And I appreciate you for tuning in to my AS story, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I'm sending you a big energy hug.